It's 10K Dre. We're back at y'all with another edition of Paper Trails. Before we get into the topic, I know I got the picture right there. If you don't know, that's good. If you do know, that's good. I want to give a shout out to, one of my peoples who messed with me in the comments, Davey FGN, and he was just talking about how I guess he recently experienced an awakening, and now that his third eye is open, he's seeing things slightly different, which is a beautiful thing. We were vibing in the comments, kind of just talking about Resident Evil and how the video I did, which y'all can go through the catalog. It's the Parallels series. It got Albert Wesker on the thumbnail, but basically, I was drawing a parallel between Resident Evil, which is really about eugenics, if we get down to it, and the eugenics, pardon me, that Black Americans have been subject to high and low key, right? So that's what spurred the conversation, which led to me delving into today's topic, which is the Georgia Guidestones. And then in that topic, we're going to make a further connection between the Georgia Guidestones and the people who mysteriously funded to have this expensive monument erected. And then we're going to connect that to um, slavery. And then on the other side of that equation is overpopulation. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Before I even touch on the topic at hand, 1865, slavery ended, but let me run that shit back, right? I ain't got the little mix sound, I'll throw that in later maybe, but we got to go pre 1865. Let's go to even 1800. When slavery was at its height, they couldn't get enough of our people, of the ancestors, to work these farms, these plantations. Let's call it what it is. Farm sounds too generic, too watered down. They were plantations. These were where our ancestors worked for generation after generation because the idea that was put forth by the Pope from the 1400s at the time of 1452, 50 years before Columbus ass was sent the fuck over here, the Pope at that time issued a papal decree which was called Dum Diversis. In this, it says to basically conquer all non Christian lands, take their resources, etc., their treasures, everything, right? And then enslave the Saracens, the Moors, and every other word to describe a melanated person and put them in perpetual servitude. That means slavery forever. But now that you got that shit, now we can go to step two. Step two is because slavery was big business, they couldn't get enough slaves. They was trying to get even more slaves. Now, if the black American, and I can't speak to the people's experience in the Caribbean, I can't speak to Central and South America, you know what I mean? Those individuals who are doing what I'm doing, researching that are in those areas, I know they putting their work in and they are speaking up and trying to connect the dots in that sense, right? Until I eventually get to that area, right? So anyway, the long and short is at the height of slavery, when all of this stuff was going on, they couldn't get enough of us. It was at the point where they were taking, the strongest of us and taking them literally on tour of other plantations so that the strongest, male slaves would impregnate the women at these other farms that they would be brought along this tour basically. So you have one. I'm just gonna put it out there, raw and uncut. You got a big LeBron James ass nigga, and everybody else on the plantation might be like 5'10" and halfway brolic, and you got this motherfucker looking like LeBron James. They would bring him probably to maybe 10, 20 different plantations across Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana to impregnate the different women there so that they could have strong children that turn out like him. And I'm telling you all of this to give you the lengths that they were going through. They were literally trying to breed our people like slaves, like I mean like cattle, which is why it was referred to as chattel slavery. They couldn't get enough of us, right? Now, once slavery ends, I want y'all to put y'all thinking caps on. You think it's a coincidence that the moment slavery ends, 1865, technically, right? But in reality, it ended a little bit later in different regions of the United States, you know. But eventually, when it did end, we'll say safely, maybe by the 1890s, coming into the 1900s, then you start to have the concept of what we call think tanks. And these think tanks, got together for different purposes. But one of the main ones was the concept of overpopulation. There's too many people on the planet. There's not enough mouths to feed. Yada yada, blah blah blah. Now I'm gonna just call these motherfuckers straight out, and come for me in the comments. Come either hate or debate or support. I don't give a fuck because I know what it is. Now, if we were still enslaved to this moment in 2026, the word overpopulation would not be in the human fucking dictionary. That's first off. Most of the world population live on coastal areas and cities. As far as the United States, from a United States perspective, most of this shit is empty, nigga. When you drive from one city to a next, which I just drove from, well, me and my family went from Atlanta to Memphis. 99.9 of that shit percent was empty until you got to like this city or that city. So let's dead the overpopulation talk. Somebody once said back in the 1990s, early 2000s, that you could probably fit the entire population of the United States comfortably in the state of Texas by itself without motherfuckers being cramped. Let that sink in. So I'm setting the table here. During slavery, they couldn't get enough of us. They was literally breeding us like cattle so they could be more and more niggas just to give it to you raw uncut. And the same shit was happening in the Caribbean, even though they were doing different type of breeding. They were breeding the women and the men to be lighter specifically in certain islands because those were sex slaves. You know what I mean? A lot of niggas, at least from Americans' standpoint, oh, look at Rihanna, look at this shorty, look at that shorty. That's why they look, bad like they do, because they were bred to kind of have that light skin tone, but still have the black features. I'm telling you, these devils was diabolical. That's why they fucking devils. So now that we got that out the way, they were breeding niggas in them islands in the Caribbeans. They was breeding motherfuckers in North America mainland, and they did the same shit in Central and South America. Once niggas got free, now there's too many people on the planet. This was a low and high key ploy to figure out scientifically and to get the best, smartest brains on the planet together to figure out how can we get rid of these niggas. We can't use them anymore. So now how can we get rid of them? And what clever ways and excuses can we use to fund this research and put it under. You know what I'm saying? That's what eugenics was and is. And if you think I'm lying, do the shit, do the Google, ask the AI. The AI gonna tell you that the eugenics was started here in America. Technically, if you want to get technical, the concepts, the early concepts started in England, then came over here. But America, like everything, America take shit to the next level. America took that shit to the next level. It took it to the next level to the point where by 1924 you have motherfuckers like Walter Plecker with the Racial Integrity Act and making it illegal for interracial marriages and shit like that. Um, and the Germans was sitting there taking notes. They were like, these devils is more diabolical than us. Look how they doing them black Americans over there. We're gonna take the same notes and apply the same cruelty and fuckery to the Jewish people in our country. And that's what the fuck they did. So everybody who has their mouth open and their hearts is all open and fluttering, oh, you still a devil. You still got white supremacist control and brainwashing because if you sympathize with the Jewish people in Germany who were subject to the Germans during World War II and have the understanding now that they learned all of those tactics from how the Anglo-Saxon devils in America were doing our people, but yet you look at us like we somehow the problem, you're still a fucking devil. Hitler is the student. America is the teacher in fuckery, hate, cruelty, etc., etc. All right, we got that out the way. Now let's get into the fucking Georgia Guidestones, which is gonna give you the high level shit. Okay, so boom. What if I told you that there was a massive stone monument in rural Georgia that laid out 10 rules to rebuild humanity after the apocalypse? And before we even get into those them joints, I gotta pivot back to my guy Davey FGN. Cause in the comments he even said that he thinks before 2030 that we will see a major cataclysm that will significantly reduce the population. Now, as crazy as that sounds, that's lining up with the talk that they were talking in these Godstones. So, to get back to it, this ain't a movie. It ain't a conspiracy. This shit is a real. This picture you see here is real granite, real carvings, real mystery behind it. And in the 2022, so 4 years earlier, it was blown up. This is the story of the Georgia Godstones that we about to get into. One of the most controversial monuments ever built in the United States. So here we go. In 1980, a mysterious man using the fake name R.C. Christian showed up in Alberton, Georgia, the granite capital of the world. He had a strange request: build a monument massive and precise, aligned with the sun and the stars and time itself, and the result is 6 slabs of granite over 19 feet tall, weighing more than 100 tons. But the real shock wasn't the structure, it was what was written on these stones. So, carved into these stones in 8 different languages were 10 guidelines for humanity, not suggestions, guidelines. And they went hard with it. Number one, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Let that one sink in. They love that perpetual word because, like I said, in the papal decrees from 1452, they wanted niggas to be in perpetual servitude. And now they want motherfuckers to be in perpetual balance with nature. And out of 8 billion people, give or take, on the planet, who do you think these lucky 500 million are going to be? Once again, put your thinking cap on. Now, the next question that I'm going to throw out there is going to help give you the answer. What percentage of the world's population do Caucasians make up? I'm not talking about the niggas in America that get added to the white club and get the white card after enough time, man. I'm talking about pure blood Caucasians. They make up less, barely 10%. I'm going to say less than 10% of the entire world population. So if we got 8 billion, 10% of that is 800 million. And out of that, right there, like I said, the number is probably even lower than 10%. And this is with Caucasians with centuries of scheming, killing, stealing, divide and conquer, purposeful plan, diseases, all of that shit. The 500 million that was meant to be in perpetual balance with nature is these Caucasians. And I put everybody in that one group. The fucking Visigoths, Ostrogoths, the Anglos, the Saxons, the Khazarians, you name it, nigga. If you ain't got melanin, you in that group. So, let that sink in for a minute. We gonna slide. So the other rules in these stones said guide reproduction wisely, which ties back to the video that I did on the Resident Evil and how that was all about eugenics, especially with the new game Requiem. It's about eugenics. It's always been about eugenics. You don't get a population from 8 billion down to 500 million without genocide, which they, if you look from the time of the 1860s when slavery ended, you have the Great War, which was World War One. That shit was so much, it was so horrible. They thought there was never gonna be another one. Then they followed it up with another one where many hundreds or millions of motherfuckers more died. And then you had constant, nonstop, smaller wars in these other countries. And not only did you have these wars in these other countries, but if we pull the fucking curtain back, you've had genocide, you've had controlled ethnic cleansing disguised as wars. And this applies to Asia as well as the Mediterranean, North Africa, and so on. So, like I said, guide reproduction wisely. That rule is basically eugenics. Translate that to that. Unite humanity with a new language. That's that's a whole other shit. So how we talk about they're already trying to whitewash shit. They already been low key white, high key and low key whitewashing history. These people who've only been on the planet for 6,000 years, who talk about the new world, the new year, the new this, the new that. Everything is new to them because they only been here 6,000 years. Where melanated people, top to bottom, left to right, been here forever. And like the ancestors said over there, even over on that side with the Egyptians, ain't nothing new under the sun. So if they supposed to be one of the early civilizations, them and the Sumerians, and niggas is talking about ain't nothing new under the sun, that tell you off rip that there was way more earlier civilizations popping. The Sumerians and the Egyptians were just a few. Them and some of the brothers on the in this North American or Western Hemisphere, or however you want to refer to it, were the survivors of whatever cataclysm that hit that earlier age. So when we talk about that Mayan calendar, and people mistranslate the end of an age. No, it was the end. I mean, the end of the world. No, it was the end of an age. And for the motherfuckers who got wiped out, it was the end of the world for them. But the long and short, a cataclysm planned or a genocide planned, it would take something on that scale to bring the population of the earth from 8 billion down to 500 million. So the fact that these devils in 1922 planned and funded these stones to be built with these rules and regulations that clearly is their mantra of what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve 90% or maybe more than that of the world population to be eliminated. You get what I'm saying? Let that shit sink in. I'm trying to tell you, motherfuckers. So we got eugenics, we got um, genocide, some kind of artificial or man or natural extinction level event that they might know about that they just ain't telling everybody. However you want to look at it, it would involve the population being brought down so low that they could literally restart and have their little white paradise. And not only can they have their white paradise, but they would have a new language. Now, language, it sounds like it's nothing, but it's everything. Just like in history, wherever these devils have went, they've conquered, killed, burnt the books of the people that they've conquered. They either burnt the books and lied and said they burnt the books and kept them and tucked them away in the Vatican, which they probably most likely did, or they were just stupid, savage like, and just ran down on these different groups of indigenous people worldwide that they were conquering and literally destroyed their whole history. Either way, it's fucked up. But when they destroyed the histories of the people that they conquered, guess what comes next? You kill off the elders, and now you teach the youth that you of the conquered people your language. So now they can only speak how you speaking. They don't have a connection to their ancestors anymore. And now if they're speaking the language you control and that you want them to speak, they're not gonna learn about what was before you came with the fuck shit. That's what this new language bar is. It's loaded with so much information in that one phrase. The next rule passion, faith, and tradition with tempered reason. Take with that as you will, because all of these religions that they control were religions that our people set up in the first place, and then they've weaseled their way in over these centuries to be heads of the various organizations and then corrupted those. You know, they'll try to tout some new age bullshit, and even that shit is on some fugazi shit. But the long and short, that's the another rule. The next one: avoid petty laws and useless officials. So you could translate that however you want to translate it. But when I see slick shit that Congress been doing, and I'm gonna say Epstein, right? Without having to say too much on that, they got their own little situation off the grid, literally, where they can do what the fuck they want to who they want with no repercussions. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Several times in the United States, within our Congress here, they tried to make proposals to, I think, remove age limits on relationships. Where, and if an adult wants to have a girlfriend that's 11 years old, they could. Look this shit up. I'm not lying on this shit. Look this shit the fuck up. That way you can come back in the comments with a dick in your mouth, like, oh, you lying, you lying, oh, you right. Yeah, yeah, shut the fuck up. So anyway, some people seen wisdom in some of the shit that they read in the tablets here. Others saw something darker, which I definitely seen something darker in that motherfucker. It's telling you about population control, elitism, because only clearly the elite are going to be part of the selected 500 million, and of course eugenics, which we already touched on. So who built this shit and why? So R.C. Christian was never identified publicly ever. He paid for everything through a local banker and then disappeared. Who got money to do shit like that? You know what I mean? We could do a deep dive, but we ain't gonna do it today. The motherfucker had bread to run everything through a local banker, not ever have his real identity exposed or revealed. He got the fuck out of Dodge. No paper trail, right? Paper trail podcast. No paper trail. No real name. No confirmed identity. Some people believe the name was a reference to the Rosicrucians, an ancient philosophical society that's tied to mysticism and hidden knowledge. So others think that it was a wealthy globalist group. And a lot of times they sound like two separate things, but a lot of times the motherfuckers are interwoven into one. And I'm going to give it to you since we're already touching on it. These hidden secret societies are these devils, these Caucasians that are practicing the rituals and and partaking in the information that our ancestors blessed them with before the power struggle or the power shift occurred from a black planet to a white controlled planet. We taught them masonry and all of these different, esoteric arts and shit like that. But once they had motherfuckers enslaved and you couldn't read and write no more and blah blah blah, now they get to try to flex like they was the ones who been carrying the torch on this shit for centuries. No, nigga, you niggas just got that info in the late 16, 1700s at earliest. You know what I mean? With the exception of like a Plato, and Plato even kept it 1,000 in his era in the BC. He said, I entered into the pyramids as a man and left out as a god. Meaning the niggas gave him so many jewels and gems that he went back amongst his, fellow people and was like, nigga, y'all niggas is dumb. I'm like God out this bitch. Do with that what y'all will. Anyway, we're going to slide on. So this is really touching on how this secret society who funded this thing were trying to indirectly shape the future after some kind of major collapse. This is once again, this is the year 1922 or so, 22, when these was built. Nuclear bombs and all that wasn't even a thought. It wasn't even a concept yet. So I don't even know how they thought they was gonna somehow um, get to a point where they was gonna bring the world from whatever billions down to 500 million from the standpoint of 1922. But they clearly figured that one way, by hook or crook, they was gonna try to fulfill this evil plan. So the location that this stones was built, it wasn't random. The Guidestones are or were because they've been destroyed in 2022. They were astronomically aligned. A hole was drilled through the stones to track the North Star, a slot aligned with the solstices, a chamber that marked noon throughout the year. This wasn't just no art piece or nothing like that. It was a message and it was meant to last thousands of years. So for decades, the Godstones they sat quietly, and then the internet found them, and then suddenly they became, a conspiracy hotspot, a target for religious groups, a symbol of the New World Order, which they're not wrong, because these people in the past were trying to literally create a new world order, and this was their 10 Commandments in person. They said fuck the little tablets that your man in the movie back in the day had. Nigga, we got the giant tablets with the commandments. So anyway, people vandalized them, they protested them, and then of course in July of 2022, boom, they were destroyed. An explosion blew it up in the middle of the night, and then they claimed for safety reasons that they had to demolish the rest of the stones later that day, and then the stones were gone. So, what were the Godstones really? Was it a guide for rebuilding civilization? Was it a warning about humanity's future? Which it definitely wasn't a warning. It was a wish list from these elite devils. Um, and somebody spent a lot of bread to put this shit up. You know what I'm saying? This shit ain't a stretch. This is this same country that a group of white people and Jewish people who participated in this industry of slavery known as the transatlantic slave trade, the local nationwide transportation and shuffling of indigenous people around and enslaving them and moving New York niggas to DC and DC niggas over to South Carolina and South Carolina's the Mississippi and shooting Mississippi niggas up the river to Ohio and Illinois. So if these Caucasians have shown you how diabolical they have been over the last 400s and what we call what the history book that everyone reads in middle and high school and even college, there should be no fucking thought in your mind of what these devils will not do to try to achieve world domination. And nigga, I'm gone. I'll holler at y'all next time. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we will you know, do some other crazy topics like this. Make recommendations in the comments. I might even link this shit to some X-Men type shit as well because I think about these people that were diabolical enough to put this shit together, and I think about groups like Friends of Humanity. You know what I mean? I think about the Genosians who in the comics literally enslaved the mutants. You know what I'm saying? And then once they could no longer enslave the motherfuckers and then they got free, then all these other groups started to pop up, the purifiers. We gotta kill all mutants. You know what I'm saying? And to them devils who still come for me in the comments about the Stan Lee, MLK, Malcolm X, fuck you again, fuck your mother. I don't give a fuck if Stan Lee says on film that they weren't the inspiration, they were the inspiration. You think that in the same fucking year that these two black civil rights activists were the talk on TV every fucking night because there was only 3 channels in America. One it had a violent approach, another one had a non-violent approach, and you think that one ain't fucking Professor X and the other one ain't Magneto, you smoking some good fucking meth. That's what the fuck you doing. I don't give a fuck what the nigga say out of his mouth. Like he just put this shit together out of thin air, knowing he was watching the nightly news or watching the TV in the office at Marvel Comics. Damn, this is some captivating shit, and this shit is happening right outside my window. Boom, 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 boom. This person is this. The Mutant Liberation Front, the Black People's Liberation, the Black Panthers. Come on, man. Put your fucking thinking caps on, nigga. But anyway, I'll catch y'all on the next one.